things that might be experienced are frustration from unmet user needs. So not really aligning yourself with what the user requires, and that might look like solving the wrong problem or even designing for yourself. And another thing that can be experienced is poor usability, which can lead to confusion. If users don't understand how to use your product, or you're solving a need that's not even aligning to your users, this can build up a lot of confusion. And then this also will lead to business loss, because that means more time has been taken designing a product that's not even being adopted by some users. So as you can see, we have an example here where Adi is excited about introducing a new feature to banking application. And this designer is focusing on using voice only because it's very tech forward. But the problem is when the user is using these products, they face the frustration of how the application basically recognizes their accent. So for instance, this user wants to send 30,000 shillings, but they cannot because the system basically recognizes this as 13,000 shillings. This can be really frustrating. Sometimes when we are blinded and focused on only designing for what we feel like is tech forward, what we feel like will push us forward in terms of where we are at with the tech, it can blind us from seeing what exactly the users need. And if we don't design for our users, that means we're designing for ourselves. So what happens when we design in the dark? As mentioned, this means that we'll have to go back to the drawing board, which means something that could have taken 6 months to basically design and build will take longer. And this will mean that we have to go back and talk to our users, understand what it is that they need so that we can start the process properly and course correct where we went wrong. The other thing that can happen is we end up creating what sometimes I call feel-good products and not products that actually solve user needs. This is because we are only designing and focusing on what we want to do and not what our users are telling us. There's nothing that we are creating that's actually evidence-based that is a problem for our users. The other thing is poor usability, which leads to confusion. If users don't understand your product or if you're solving the wrong problem, how then do we expect them to use the platform, that application? How do we expect adoption to even take place? And as mentioned before, this in turn just leads to business loss because of the time taken, because we are not basically acquiring any users onto our platform. So now I'm going to tell you guys a little story of how I found myself in this situation of basically designing for myself, or rather, the organization I was in, my team and I, we were designing for ourselves and not the user. So there's a time my team and I were working on a tipping application. And when we first started, our main focus was on cryptocurrency. So crypto would have been the main mode of transaction within the tipping application, which means that service workers receive tips through crypto and they get sent tips through crypto. What we didn't realize is that our target audience at the time didn't even understand what crypto is, making it hard even for them to understand what value this product was going to bring to them. So once we talked to our users and got to understand that some of them are not even knowledgeable about crypto, we had to go back to the drawing board and see how we can course correct. And of course, these decisions were made based off our understanding with the users. So the processes that we took meant that we have to do research, and this looks like just going to sit down with the users, talk to them through interviews and even through observation so that we can study their behavior. What we noticed is that most people just use regular cash for tipping or tipping through mobile money methods. And we realized that the most comfortable method that people are used to when it comes to tipping is through using cash. So we had to think about our solution because we had already seen that it does not align with our users based off the reactions we had gotten. And when it comes to research and with this specific product, it wasn't even about just them not being knowledgeable about crypto, but like I said, even through observation and talking to them, understanding what their day-to-day activity looks like, how they use our application on a day-to-day basis. When we talked to the service workers, most of them expressed that when they receive tips, they actually end up using the tips they've received for that day within a day or two. And this would be used to serve some of their daily needs, like using bus fare or buying a meal or two. So where had we gone wrong with all of this? The problem is we were focused on what the technology would do and not what the problem our current users were facing. We let the tech lead us, and that's not the approach we should have taken at the time. So we quickly took these learnings and course corrected and applied solutions that would be most applicable and suitable to our users. And we ended up actually just adopting mobile money to have it as a way to transact within the platform. So I think a big lesson for us at the time is that we can't just create solutions or come up with suggestions to problems without having enough evidence or insights from our users. And this is exactly what I mean by when we design in the dark or blindly, we're just designing for ourselves. We are designing out of excitement. And I know sometimes we just want to go for whatever tech forward thing or whatever tech is trending at the moment, but we have to sit back, look back and understand, is this something that can actually help our users in the long run? So having explained all that, we can see that when we're designing the tipping application, we shifted from thinking about tech being the center of a solution and focusing on the users. And this is what UCD is about. It's basically about putting users at the center of design and actually bringing them along the process at each stage of design. So how can we implement the UCD process? As you can see here, this is basically how the UCD process looks like. It's quite similar to how the design thinking diagram looks like. I'm pretty sure most of you have seen it. But the process of UCD basically starts with research, and this means acquiring context and learning who our primary users would be, and then looking at what their requirements are. So looking at their pain points, what their needs are. And when I look at these two processes, research can look like doing desk research. It can look like holding user interviews just to get a bit of a better understanding as to who you are designing for. And then when it comes to identifying pain points, basically the insights that you get from research is what will feed into the requirements. And I can even give an example when it comes to creating user personas. We just don't create user personas out of the air. It's the things that we've gotten from research that will basically inform what the user persona will be. And I can give an example. Say you've gone to a low resource area and you're trying to create a solution for them where they can basically learn about healthcare tips. And you're looking at which methods can we engage these users. Of course, we live in the world where it's easy to access information, and the assumption is a lot of people have smartphones. And I've used the word assumption because looking on the outside, that's what seems like it's the gospel truth, but it's not the case. So if I go to a low income place and I just basically observe the day-to-day activities, how the people there engage, I might notice that most of the people who are in the low income areas use feature phones. So in this case, I have to think and understand, will I just decide to create a patient engagement platform, or are there other methods that I can use to engage my users? If I choose to create a platform, an application, this might not align with my users because they do not have smartphones, but using something like USSD might be a preferable option. So once we gather the requirements, Then we move on to design, and this is the stage where we get to ideate and prototype. Once we have our ideas laid out and the prototypes, we get to test and evaluate. And this process is quite repetitive, and we'll see it in the slides that are coming forward. So you can see on my screen, there are different rules that have been presented. And this is basically to show that the UCD process is not just supposed to be a process that designers use only. When it comes to UCD, you have to involve a multidisciplinary team because they have different inputs, and this can also it can also feed into your research process. So as you can see, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with the design thinking diagram. It's not too different from how the UCD diagram looks like. And basically with design thinking, we start with empathy, and then we go to defining our problem, we ideate, prototype, test, and the process is repetitive. So design thinking and UCD basically work hand in hand. Design thinking helps us frame the problem quite clearly, and then UCD helps us come up with those practical solutions and solutions that serve the user. This is not to mean that business goals are not considered. At the end of the day, if we are aligning with what the user needs are, this will also ensure that there's business success. So looking at the steps in the design thinking process and how they feed into UCD. So to understand our users, we deeply need to carry out research so that we can able to understand who they are, what their needs are, and what their pain points are. And as I mentioned before, this can be done through different ways in research. So this can be through like field study where you just go and observe. And this is actually quite important because sometimes what we say is not what we do. Yes. And then also desk research, just trying to get to see what other people have done, what other solutions have been created for maybe the same kind of audience you are designing for. Having user interviews, and this is quite important because it can help you understand the decisions that have been made by a particular user. And then also engaging stakeholders who can give you direction, or they might be more knowledgeable, even when I look at people who are domain experts in certain industries. Let's say you're creating an oncology tool, you'll have to engage some oncologists just to better understand how that world looks like. And then also acquiring requirements and constraints. When it comes to defining the problem, we have to define a problem that's clear and a problem that we can understand, and one that focuses on the users and not just the business. This is because sometimes some business goals don't align with what we are trying to solve for the user. Using the example that I gave for the tipping app, what we were pushing was just being tech forward and using cryptocurrency to push the product. But when we look at our primary users, this is not something that they were used to or something that they'd engage with in their day-to-day activity, which would mean that if we had gone with the direction of using crypto only, we would not have any users on the platform. And in turn, the business would not make any revenue because you don't have any users at all. And the way I like to employ when it comes to framing problems is using how might we statements so that it can just help us focus on the users and look at what really is that pain point that we're trying to solve. The next step would be to translate insights into user flows and wireframes. So at different stages, we need different visuals just to help us visualize how we are leading up to the solution. I really like to start with the low fidelity designs. This is because I can quickly iterate, get feedback on them, and then move on to the next thing. And one thing that's good about starting with user flows and the wireframes even before you get to the high fidelity designs is that you can quickly test and quickly get feedback before investing on a solution. You get more insights and you get to improve it quickly. You can imagine starting with hi-fi already having so many flows designed, and now you have to change the entire thing. That can take up a lot of time. And like I said, this can lead to wasted efforts, and this will mean that deadlines might be missed. Once we have our prototypes ready, it's good to just validate our assumptions before launching. And some of the ways we can do this are through various methods of testing. We can carry out usability tests, which helps us just to see how users complete their tasks, how they navigate throughout the platform, and basically help us to see what areas we can improve. And I think observation is really good because, like I said, what people say versus what they do could be different things. And this just helps you understand and empathize with the user more. The other thing would be heuristic evaluation, and this is just basically usability principles and ensuring that there aren't any usability issues within the platform, and this can be done well within a team. Let's say if you have a design lead within the team, they can help you assess this. Another method would be through A/B testing, and one way I think I like to use A/B testing is maybe to look at, let's say if I have a screen and I'm trying to see what would be more favorable for mobile, either using stacked cards or using a grid, I can basically see how one style maybe works for a particular audience and how one style works for another audience, or even both styles working for one audience. And basically how they engage with the two different designs can help me make a decision. The other way would be to analyze heat maps. You can see where your users spend more time on, how they navigate the platform, what first step do they take. And there are some tools that can actually help with this. One of them is Hotjar. You can explore and experiment with that and see how actually it can be beneficial to your design. Surveys and feedback are really good to gauge satisfaction of the user and identify if there are any pain points or if actually the product is serving them well. Both positive and negative feedback is feedback. And this is good input that you can use in your design so that you can know what to keep, what to improve, or what to remove. The other thing would be fast click text testing, and this is to just check if users navigate intuitively and also see what their first landing point is. When they enter the application, what action do they take first? The other thing would be through field studies. And like I had mentioned before, observation is a really important way of validating or even analyzing our users and just seeing how they interact with our product. And I can give a bit of a distinction between this and usability testing. You might find you have an organized way of testing. So let's say you selected 10 people to come and test the tipping application. Already in your mindset, you know you're here to test, but then also looking at how people use your product in a real life scenario, like when a waitress is actually serving in the process, when somebody who's come to enjoy a good meal at a restaurant, once they are done with eating and they've paid for their bill, an added step of paying a tip, how does that look like? Is the process easy or hard for them? In a hospital, how do the clinicians or rather even the front desk workers get to use an EMR? So looking at how your users actually use your product in a real life scenario can give you more insight and you can know how to improve. Maybe if they're using a scanning app for an event, maybe it takes 2 minutes to scan and you realize that actually that's too much time and it's poor user experience for ticketing agents. So that can give you information on where and how to improve your product. And then lastly is accessibility testing. And one thing about accessibility is we need to be able to design for all. So ensuring that readability is there ensuring that there's no one who's actually missed out and that we are just being inclusive in the choices that we are making when it comes to designing. So how do we know that UCD is working when we employ it? One way can be through KPIs. And what we can actually check is user engagement. Has our platform engagement improved or has it decreased? This can definitely tell us in terms of performance how we are moving. And even looking at the conversion rates, are they high or are they low? And user satisfaction rates. And NPS score is a really great way to check this, and even customer satisfaction scores. So this is something like having a rating probably when a user has completed a process on an application, just to rate, give this between the rating of 1 to 5, and seeing how you are ranked by the user. Then the other thing would be looking at post-launch feedback. So this can be through in-app surveys, feedback forms, just to gather more insight from your users, and even user forums. So once you're done with creating your application and once it's live and out in the public, you can gather people and basically get feedback through conducting workshops as well. This can be a method that can help you just engage with your users and see how they perceive your product, and this can give you information on where to improve. So remember one thing, that designing for users equals designing for success, and UCD drives better experiences and better business success. This is because we have already engaged our users, so we know what we are designing for. We're not designing things from our imagination or just creating feel-good products. We actually get to solve real-life problems, and this in turn impacts the people we are designing for. And how does success look like? So basically, it's things that we'll see and notice when we employ UCD is increased user adoption and satisfaction. And like I said, this is because you've involved your users through each process of the design process. Yes, they've not missed at any point, and you're able to get feedback from them through testing and iteration. So you'll know the areas to improve on, and you don't have to pay the painful price of having to redesign just because there are things that you missed at the beginning. And then you'll also have confidence in product decisions. This is because the decisions that you made, the design decisions that you make are based off insights from your users. These are things that your users have told you, and you can actually see how they apply into the product. And as mentioned as well, there'll be reduced redesign costs just because time has been taken to actually do enough research, test with your users. Therefore, when it comes to creating the real thing and actually ensuring that the product goes into development and that it's live, you won't have to suffer the cost of low adoption, issues that could have been solved earlier, and you won't have to go back to the drawing board. Yes, iteration will still be there because design is a continuous process. It's an iterative process, but it won't be, you won't pay the heavy costs of not listening to your users and starting again. There might be improvements on the platform, but it won't be a restart. Then the other thing is you get to design products that actually solve real problems and not just feel good products. And this actually helps you improve somebody's life. Maybe your products can help a mother book an appointment for their child, or even understand some of the symptoms that they have in their journey of pregnancy. And this is something that would be quite impactful and help make the world a better place. And all in all, this will just have greater product success. So you remember our person who was trying to send 30,000 shillings, but could not because the system was basically recognizing 30,000 shillings as 13,000 shillings because of our user's accent. With iteration, our user is now happier because typing has been has been added as a method that someone can use to make their transaction. And just having this as an option makes it easier for our users because they can easily command the system on what they want it to do. So you can see our user is here saying, I can now send the 30,000 shillings to my stylist and get that new wig before the sale ends. So by prioritizing our users, what do? We create products that truly matter. And that's the end of our presentation today. And I would like to now ask you if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Rita. We have some questions in chat. You want me to read them to you?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first question is from Christine, and she says that she really resonates with the given example, given that at the start, sometimes you do focus on the solution or how, forgetting the user's problem. So our question to you is, how will you ensure UCD is still honored when the vital stakeholders already decided on what they want the solution to be?
That's a really good question. And I can definitely resonate with the question that has been asked because sometimes we do have that fight of what stakeholders want and the focus on this is what the business wants. But then I think as designers, it's very important for us to be the advocate of the users and iterate the costs, or rather, what we'll have to pay if we don't actually take time when it comes to doing proper research and listening to what our users want. It might seem like a lot of money or a lot of resources needs to be dedicated when it comes to carrying out user research, but would you rather suffer the costs of having to redesign an entire product just because you did not listen to your users, or just spend a little bit more time in research, get the right pain points, solve the right problems? I think for us designers, it's also important for us to be able to pitch and fight for our users. It's a difficult state to be in, trying to see how can I serve the stakeholders and how can I serve the users? But I always fight for being the advocate of the user, and definitely not ignoring the business goals. And I can say there are definitely user needs that align with business goals. So even prioritizing that can be a good starting point.
Okay, thank you for that. Jerry has also added that from his point of view, it's better to go with them from data from the users since they are likely to listen to evidence from users. So it doesn't just seem like an opinion or preference.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
on to the next one. We have a question from Nicole Omaya. How much user research is enough research?
That's a good question. How much user research is enough research? I can't say that I can give it like an exact figure, but I think something like even with interviews, if you have like 10 to 20 people you've interviewed, that's a really good number. And I think sometimes for us not to get caught up in research for a really long time, a lot of really is because we should spend enough time. Once we've acquired enough insight to help us push forward a product, it's a good place to start because, again, this is a process that is quite iterative. We just need to get to the first point and then go back to our users and validate some of the assumptions that we've had. So I think just getting to a point where you can actually test out your product or engage with your user would be a good point to start out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. We have a question from Irene. She asked, how do you prioritize features or feedback when different user segments or stakeholders have conflicting opinions? what's most important?
That's actually a good question. I think evidence is in the data that you gather. So, for example, I'll use the tipping up again as an example. If most users, let's say we've tested with like 20 users, and out of the 20, 15 cannot withdraw their tips, and only five have an issue with um, how much money should be retained in the application. Let's say the policy of the application is that 20% needs to be retained in your wallet and you can only withdraw the remaining 80. If it's only a problem for five, then it would only make sense to first prioritize the issue of withdrawal for our users, because that could lead to a lot of people not engaging with the application. So if I look at 15 versus 5, the majority of the issue is with the 15. I would solve that first because clearly it's a big problem. So I'd say look at the numbers. And also sometimes when it comes to analyzing the data that you've gotten from research, understand that what problem is actually a problem of majority of the users or just one person. We can't solve a problem for just one person. And then when it comes to looking at the business goals, because at the end of the day, we can't have a platform that is existing and we are not making money. We still need to analyze and see how this affects our revenue. Maybe a feature that has been suggested could cost us time or money to create. So it would be really good to consult with maybe product managers on that, or even key stakeholders like founders on that, and just looking at what their input is in terms of priority. When it comes to business goals, yes, the right people to engage with would be the founders. Product managers, I believe, too, can help with that. I know there are some product managers in this call right now, but having that balance of ensuring that you advocate for your user, looking at the numbers, the data, and also maintaining business goals should be there, so that we also don't have a product that um, is not making any revenue at all. But for sure, look at the number.
Sorry, thank you for that. Uh, thank you, Preston, for engaging on the comment. So we have another question from Bete, and she's asking, how do you go about having a bigger pain point discovered during research, which is completely different from what you had initially thought was the problem that needed to be solved?
That's a really good question. So the problem you thought needed to be solved is an assumption. And this is why, like you stated, research is important, and you'll go to your users and you discover actually whatever I was trying to solve is not the problem. Sometimes users can inform the product, right? So what you do in this case is cause correct. Yeah. So maybe you'd think that, I don't know what example I can give. When we are using a banking app, maybe what you are trying to solve for are for people who are trying to send money within the same network, or rather, let's say if it's looped to loop, KCB to KCB, because maybe you think that's the problem, but then you realize that actually a lot of people can't send money from their banking app to M-Pesa. So that will actually inform you, and you'll have to kind of redirect, course correct, and solve the issue that you can clearly see your users are having and what their biggest pain point is. And that's what the purpose of research is, to help us understand our users and their pain points and their needs. Yeah, so in that case, don't lock yourself to, this is what I thought the problem was, this is what we wanted to solve, this is what we have to do. You can always go back and course correct. Yes.
Okay. We also have another question from Irene. She's asking, how do you avoid losing sight of user needs during the design process, especially when working under tight deadlines?
That's a tough one. And I believe realistically, a lot of us have experienced that. You come up with a good plan of how you're going to prioritize features, but things just get in the way. I'd say creating a roadmap of how these features are going to be designed, developed, launched is really a good way to do it. And then depending on how your team has been structured, if you have like a design lead, a PM who can be the advocate of staying on track, basically you actually need someone who can help you stay in track with what the features you have prioritized, ensure that things don't basically distract you from your main goal. It's a very hard thing to do, but in a team, we always need that one person who can steer us back into the right direction. If this is not a PM, it's a design lead.
Okay, thank you for that. We also have a question from YouTube from Chantel. She's asking, how do you venture back into research, even if you've started, and what are the chances that the clients will agree to pivot? How do we get them to agree?
Mhm. That's a really good question. So, like I mentioned, this entire process is an iterative process. So I can't say it's a strict start to end process. So you can get to a point and actually realize that maybe you are solving the wrong problem and you need to go back to the drawing board. At whatever point research is needed and engaging with your users, actually, let me say engaging with your users, that's a better term. Don't make it seem like we are restarting this process. They're following you throughout the journey. They're with you throughout the journey of design. You're actually designing with them, not just for them. So as you involve them in the process, it's not like when we first I engaged with you guys in the beginning, this was the first and the final engagement. No, the process should just basically be like how will I call it? It should be continuous engagement with your users. So there's no complete start, no complete finish when it comes to user research. So when it comes to asking them if they can pivot or the fear of this is what we had created, and now if we give this to our users, they might not adopt. That again can still give you insights. And then what has informed you guys creating this new feature, or rather, what has informed you guys what did you mention? What has informed you guys leaving behind whatever you had created to create this new thing that then needs to go back to the users for you to do research with them. So I just say engage them throughout the entire process. Don't make it seem like there's a start and end when it comes to research. It's just a continuous process of design. Yeah.
Thanks for that. We also have a question from Christine. She's asking, looking back uh, at your journey in product design, how has your work experience shaped how you design products? That is, what has working on multiple products taught you about design that you initially wouldn't have thought about?
Mm. That's a good question, Christine. So, having worked in different industries, healthcare, fintech, edtech, I think understanding different audiences is important. Just because something worked for one audience doesn't mean it will work for a different for another audience. And then the importance of empathy. But the biggest thing and the biggest learning lesson for me is actually being with the users where they're at physically, if you can. Well, if you're designing for region that's not within your region, let's say I'm in Kenya, I'm designing for Germans, that might be hard. But in situations where I can be there physically with my users, it's important because I can get to see how they carry out their day-to-day activities. I can see how the products I've created can help them, where fixing needs to happen. And this is because when you're not with your users, I think a lot of things are left to assumption. Like 2 years ago, if you'd asked me that if USSD can be a solution for a certain user type, I'd just look at you like, why are we still using USSD? Isn't this something of the past? Like we should be moving forward because we have smartphones. But then you do realize that there's an audience that needs that. And really being empathetic towards our users, I think that's how mindset, oh, English is out the door. My mindset has shifted when it comes to looking at users and engaging with them, and also understanding that solutions can come from different people, not just the design team. Yes, the mandate might seem like it's design's mandate to come up with a solution, but even engaging other teams like the customer service teams, they're the ones who get the complaints from the users. They're the ones who actually even engage with users more than we do. So they are a very, very, very good resource to use when it comes to ideating, when it comes to problem solving. So just seeing how other people can pour into my design has become a huge part of how I think and how I design. Yeah.
Thank you for that. The Kenya says this is a great presentation, Yanita. She has learned a lot during this meeting. We also have a question from Orina. Let me give the compliment first. Great presentation, Yanita. Then his question is, how do you defend user research findings that contradict with the leadership decision?
Mm, this is similar to a question that has been asked before, but yes, leadership can get in the way because, of course, they're focusing more on their business than on the user. But someone did mention coming to them with evidence and data from the research you've done with the users. I don't think anything can really beat the numbers. Clearly, if you see that we are having a lot of drop off at this point, at this stage in our product, maybe we have a lot of drop offs when it comes to sending money because the process is long. Maybe there are a lot of details that people need to fill. So you end up finding that people are not even completing the process of transferring money, sending money to other people because the process is long. And we basically inform leadership that that's a key problem and this is how it will affect the business. It can actually be a point of interest to them. So I think it's important not just to present data as this is what I found on the ground, this is what I found from my research, but also relating it to business goals. How does this affect our revenue? How does this affect retention? How does this affect acquisition? So speaking to them in a language that they can understand. As designers, we design for our users, right? Our users are not just the end users of our product, but in the moment we are pitching for ideas, we also need to understand that the people in the room with us are also users at the moment. So speak to leadership, speak to various stakeholders in a language that is more familiar to them and in a language that they can understand. So relate the research findings that you have found with business goals. That way, you're able to convince them and basically show them the importance of why we need to take action.
Thank you for that. Hi, Polly. Thanks for joining us from Uganda. So Christine appreciates the answer that you gave her. It was very insightful. So I'd like to open up the meeting to other people within the meeting. I know that the questions that have been presented, you might have worked with a product and you want to share your insights on the same. If you're not managed to share it on chat, so you can just raise your hand and we'll be able to take that, or yeah, just share knowledge with the community. In the meantime, I just like to thank Rita for this session. I don't know how you want to close it out, but just say the word and we'll go.
Why does that remind me of mass? Anyway, I think I can open up the floor for anyone who'd want to share their experience when it comes to the UCD process, fighting with management, when it comes to balancing business goals and user needs, I can open that up. You can share some of the ways you have tackled this and ways that have worked for you or challenges you're experiencing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. In the meantime, as you find your courage to speak, I'm finding a quiet space. I'd like to share opportunities that we've come across for March. I think junior graphic designers will eat well this month because most of the roles are tailored to them. Yeah, you can get that on the Google Doc that I've shared. Please let me know if you've gotten it and share it within your network so that other people may learn roles with this. And also, feel free to leave comments on the documents. We'll be able to go through them. And I want to give a massive shout out to Rita. This session has been really insightful. Thank you so much for honoring us and coming to grace us with your presence. I've actually learned a lot about UCD. I also have a question, but it's about the heuristic evaluation on when we were discussing about heuristic evaluations. So kawaida, the way I know it, heuristic evaluations are usually done with the three, I think, are they 12 or 11 principles on them? So the way I was taught, I have actually never conducted like a heuristic evaluation on products that have already like designed with the users. Also conduct it like when we are during the research process. But I was just wondering, since the research is iterative, have you had an experience where you had to conduct the heuristic evaluation post product design to understand how users are interacting with it, or do you conduct it? Have you conducted it pre or post the design?
Mm. That's a good question. Actually, um, I'd say post the design because sometimes we find that there are things we missed in the process. And more so, that's how I've tested it or how I've done it. Sometimes it comes from the team internally. Yeah. And I think this is because we think about the processes more, or even looking at how a user has articulated it, and even feedback from like the customer uh, service team. Maybe there's an issue with um, let's say error, and we've not done like error prevention, so that can be something that we actually solve. And even evaluating or looking at the design, seeing if there are any points that have been missed in terms of consistency. Let me just say a bit of both, because when I look at something like consistency, this is something that we'd probably do before the product is shipped out, and even before it goes into development. And even after it has gone to development, of course, you have to cross-check and see if the what has been developed matches what is on the design. So I can say both pre and post. Yeah, both pre and post.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think I look forward to more like heuristic evaluation post designs so that I can be an iterative designer. So from the audience, there's no one wants to share us their wisdom. So you're receiving a lot of love from the chats. Bete says thank you for an awesome presentation. That goes to you. Christine, the same. She says an awesome presentation, Juanita, very insightful, and you are very articulate. You are an articulate speaker. So
Guys, you want
we have,
to you. Thank you, guys.
and also you're receiving some love from Uganda by Polly, who is saying that this is a great presentation. Um, Yeah, I guess we are coming close to the end of the meeting. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you. And yeah, Rita, do you want people to reach you on LinkedIn? Amada, you're like, adios.
And you guys can reach me on LinkedIn. You can reach each other on LinkedIn. Yes.